Once upon a time, in a bustling city filled with towering skyscrapers and streets lined with bright lights, there lived a man named Ryan who was preparing for what he believed to be the most important day of his life. Ryan was a wealthy businessman who had risen to the top of his game after years of ruthless ambition and cunning decisions. Today, he was about to marry Amelia, a young woman from a wealthy family who adored his success and saw in him the perfect partner to match her own luxurious lifestyle. The grand ballroom of one of the city's most prestigious hotels had been transformed into a vision of elegance and extravagance. Crystal chandeliers glimmered above tables draped in silk cloths, each adorned with towering centerpieces of roses and orchids. Guests in glamorous attire laughed and mingled, sipping champagne from crystal flutes while waiters moved gracefully between them, offering hors d'oeuvres. Ryan stood near the entrance, his designer tuxedo perfectly tailored, his smile sharp and confident. But beneath that polished exterior, there was a glint of malice in his eyes, for today wasn't just about celebrating his new marriage. It was also about revenge. Ryan had invited his ex-wife, Emily, to his wedding. The woman who had once been his everything, the woman who had supported him through his darkest days, had been left heartbroken when he abruptly left her 2 years ago for Amelia. He had believed Emily was holding him back, too simple, too modest for the high-powered life he wanted. He had blamed her for his struggles, though she had stood by him through every failure. Today, he wanted her to see how far he had come without her. Ryan had instructed the staff to seat Emily in the very front row, where she would have no choice but to watch every moment of his grand wedding unfold. He pictured her arriving in a modest dress, maybe even something worn out, her hair pulled back without much care, and tears in her eyes as she watched him marry another woman in this palace of wealth and luxury. He wanted her to feel small, insignificant, and forgotten. The thought filled him with a twisted sense of satisfaction. As the hour approached, guests whispered in excitement, cameras flashed, and Amelia, dressed in a dazzling white gown that sparkled under the lights, prepared to make her entrance. Ryan kept glancing at the door, waiting for Emily to arrive. Minutes ticked by, and she was still nowhere to be seen. He smirked, assuming she was too humiliated to show her face. That would be even better, he thought. But then the sound of luxury engines echoed outside the venue. Guests turned their heads, curious about the commotion. Outside, a sleek black limousine with tinted windows slowly pulled up to the grand hotel entrance. The chauffeur stepped out and walked around to open the back door, and there she was. Emily. She stepped out of the limo in a flowing midnight blue gown that shimmered with every step she took. Her hair, styled in soft waves, cascaded over her shoulders. Her makeup was flawless, accentuating her natural beauty. Gasps filled the crowd as Emily appeared more radiant than anyone had ever remembered her being. She wasn't alone. As she turned to help 3 small children step out of the car, the whispers grew louder. They were triplets, identical little boys, all dressed in perfectly tailored suits, their faces bright with innocence and curiosity. The scene was so unexpected that even Ryan, who had been expecting to humiliate her, was left frozen, his confident smirk faltering. Emily carried herself with elegance, her posture straight, her expression calm but powerful. The triplets held her hands as they walked into the ballroom, their little shoes clicking against the marble floor. Conversations hushed. All eyes were on her. Guests whispered among themselves. Who was this stunning woman? Were those Ryan's children? Had he known? Emily walked gracefully down the aisle, every step deliberate, her gaze fixed ahead, not even glancing at Ryan. The boys looked around with wide-eyed curiosity, their presence turning heads and melting hearts. Some of the older women in the crowd whispered about how beautiful Emily looked and how adorable the children were. Ryan felt a lump in his throat, an emotion he wasn't prepared for. He forced himself to smile, trying to regain control of the situation. When Emily reached the front row, she took a seat with the boys beside her, each one climbing onto a chair with perfect manners. A waiter came by, offering her a glass of champagne. She thanked him softly, her voice carrying a grace that only added to her allure. Ryan couldn't take his eyes off her. She looked like a completely different woman from the one he had left behind. The woman he remembered had always been tired from working 2 jobs to help pay bills, wearing simple clothes and never buying anything for herself. Now, she looked like she belonged in this world of luxury more than he or Amelia ever had. The wedding ceremony began, but Ryan's mind wasn't on Amelia's vows or the music playing softly in the background. He was too distracted by the sight of Emily and the 3 little boys. His boys. He recognized their features. The curve of their jawline, The color of their eyes, even the way one of them tilted his head when curious, it was all him. His heart pounded as realization hit. Emily hadn't just moved on. She had raised his children without him. As Amelia walked down the aisle, her expensive gown glimmering, Ryan forced himself to smile and hold her hand. The guests cheered and clapped as the officiant began the ceremony. But Ryan's mind kept wandering to Emily. He remembered the nights she had stayed up late sewing his torn shirts so he could wear them to work, the meals she had skipped to make sure he ate, the encouragement she had given him when he felt like a failure. And then he remembered how he had left her. He had told her she wasn't good enough for him. He had accused her of holding him back. He had walked out with nothing but a suitcase, ready to start a new life with Amelia. Now, here she was, glowing, powerful, and not alone. She hadn't begged for him to come back. She hadn't come to shame him either. She had simply arrived, living proof that she didn't need him to succeed. As the ceremony continued, Ryan's hands trembled slightly. When it came time to exchange vows, Amelia read hers, a flowery speech about wealth, power, and admiration for Ryan's ambition. It sounded rehearsed, almost hollow. Then it was Ryan's turn. He tried to speak, but his words felt heavy in his throat. He glanced at Emily again, and one of the little boys was staring back at him, his big brown eyes filled with curiosity. The sight pierced Ryan's heart like a dagger. He stumbled over his words, earning confused looks from Amelia and a few guests. Finally, the ceremony ended, and the guests erupted into applause. Amelia smiled and leaned in for a kiss, which Ryan gave half-heartedly. Then it was time for the reception, and the ballroom filled with music and laughter once again. But Ryan couldn't enjoy it. He kept stealing glances at Emily, who was now surrounded by guests eager to talk to her. Her grace and charm drew people in effortlessly, while the triplets became the stars of the evening, entertaining guests with their innocent giggles and playful antics. Unable to take it any longer, Ryan made his way over to her. "Emily," he said softly. She looked up at him, her expression calm, almost indifferent. "Ryan," she replied coolly. "You look amazing," he said awkwardly. "Thank you," she replied, her tone polite but distant. He looked at the boys, who were now nibbling on small pastries. "They're ours, aren't they?" he asked quietly. Emily's eyes softened slightly as she looked at her children. "Yes, Ryan," she said firmly. "These are your sons. You left before I knew I was pregnant. I tried to reach you, but you had already moved on." Ryan felt his stomach twist. The guilt hit him like a tidal wave. "Emily, I didn't know," he stammered. "Would it have mattered?" she asked sharply. Her voice was calm, but her words cut deep. "You told me I wasn't good enough for you. You made your choice." He opened his mouth to speak but found himself speechless. Emily continued, "I didn't come here to ruin your wedding, Ryan. I came because you invited me. Maybe you thought you'd embarrass me. But I have nothing to be ashamed of. I have 3 beautiful boys, a career I'm proud of, and a life I built without you." Her words echoed in his mind as she turned her attention back to her sons, who tugged at her dress, asking for more desserts. Ryan stood frozen, watching her smile at them with genuine love, a warmth he hadn't felt in years. Amelia approached, her expression sour. "Ryan, darling, come dance with me," she said, tugging his arm. But he couldn't take his eyes off Emily. Throughout the evening, Ryan found himself unable to focus on his own wedding. He watched Emily laughing with guests, watched the boys running around, their laughter filling the hall. Something inside him ached. For years, he had chased wealth and status, believing they would bring him happiness. But standing there, watching Emily surrounded by love, he realized how empty he truly felt. As the night wore on, Ryan finally gathered the courage to approach Emily again, this time outside on the terrace where she stood with a glass of champagne, watching the city lights. "Emily," he said softly. She turned to him, her expression unreadable. "I owe you an apology," he said, his voice trembling. "For everything. For leaving, for hurting you, for missing out on them." He gestured toward the boys inside. Emily took a deep breath. "Ryan, I forgave you a long time ago," she said. "Not for you, but for myself. I couldn't carry that pain forever. But forgiveness doesn't mean I want you back. I built this life for them, and for me. We're happy." Ryan felt tears sting his eyes. "They're beautiful," he whispered. Emily's gaze softened slightly. "They are, and they'll grow up knowing their worth, Ryan. I won't let them feel abandoned the way I did." He nodded, his heart breaking. Can I be a part of their lives? He asked hesitantly. Emily studied him for a long moment. That's not for me to decide. That's for them to choose when they're old enough. Right now, I just want them to feel safe and loved. Ryan lowered his head, ashamed. For the first time in years, he felt powerless. All the wealth, the success, the prestige, it meant nothing compared to what he had lost. As Emily walked back inside, her sons ran to her, their little arms wrapping around her legs. She knelt down, hugging them tightly, her face glowing with joy. Ryan watched from a distance, his heart heavy with regret. Amelia noticed his gaze and frowned, jealousy flashing in her eyes. She grabbed his arm and whispered sharply, "Stop staring at her. She's just your ex." But Ryan couldn't stop. In that moment, he realized he had made the biggest mistake of his life. Emily left the wedding early, her triplets in tow, their laughter echoing through the grand hall as they headed back to their limousine. Guests whispered about her, some saying she was the most elegant woman at the event, others marveling at her strength. Ryan stood at the entrance, watching her limo disappear into the night, knowing deep down he would never forget that moment. He had tried to shame her, but instead, she had shown him what true strength and dignity looked like. Later that night, as the reception wound down and Amelia mingled with guests, Ryan found himself alone, sitting at a table with an untouched glass of champagne. The laughter and music around him felt hollow. He thought about Emily, about the boys, about all the nights she had sacrificed for him when they had nothing. He remembered how she had always believed in him, even when he didn't believe in himself. And he remembered the look in her eyes when she told him she was happy without him. That look would haunt him for years to come. Sometimes, Ryan thought, karma doesn't come in anger or revenge. Sometimes, it comes quietly, in the form of someone you hurt standing tall, stronger and more radiant than you ever imagined. Emily had walked into his wedding like a queen, not to humiliate him, but simply because she had nothing to prove. And that was the greatest revenge of all. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to like, share, and subscribe for more powerful and emotional stories that remind us all about love, dignity, and the true meaning of success.